All right, today we're going to dive into the massive, complicated crisis at Trinidad and Tobago's Water and Sewage Authority. You probably know it as WASA. We're going to unpack how an institution that was created to be a modern marvel for the nation's water supply is now, well, teetering on the brink of collapse. And look, this isn't just my opinion or something you read in the news. That quote right there, dysfunctional in its entirety, that comes from an official cabinet subcommittee report. I mean, wow. That's a huge official statement that tells you right away just how deep this rabbit hole goes. So, the big question is, how did it get this bad? The whole story, when you really look at it, is a paradox. It's a puzzle. How does an organization that started with so much promise end up in a state of, well, total system failure? Let's go back for a second. It's 1965. The oil boom is on, and WASA is born with this really clear, ambitious mission: modernize the country's water supply. They consolidated all the old, smaller systems and built huge new projects. But you flash forward to today, and that bright future has curdled into a legacy of absolute operational and financial disaster. You know, the crazy thing is, the seeds of this crisis were planted right at the very beginning. They did an incredible job building these massive assets, dams, treatment plants, the whole shebang. But here's the critical flaw. They never put a real, sustainable financial plan in place to actually maintain any of it. All the focus was on building new stuff, not on keeping the old stuff from falling apart. And that original sin, that failure to plan for the long term, leads us right to the most shocking and, frankly, visible part of the problem today: the unbelievable amount of water that is just lost. Okay, so to really get this, there's a key term you need to know: unaccounted for water, or UFW. Now, this isn't just any water. This is water that has been fully treated, it's ready to drink, it's been pushed into the pipes, but it never makes it to a customer. It just disappears, mostly leaking out of a pipe network that's been crumbling for decades. So, how much are we talking about? The estimate is just staggering. It's 50%. Half. Let that sink in for a second. For every 2 liters of clean, drinkable water that WASA produces, 1 liter never reaches a tap. It just leaks into the ground. It's like, imagine you own a bakery. You spend all this money on flour and sugar and you pay your bakers, and then you take half of the bread you baked that day and just throw it straight in the garbage. Every single day. That is the reality of WASA's operations. So, as you can probably guess, when you have half of your product literally going down the drain, you're going to have a financial problem. Except in this case, it's not a problem, it's a catastrophe, a billion-dollar hole. Just look at these numbers. They are truly mind-bending. Every year, WASA brings in about 700 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars in revenue. Okay, but what does it cost to run the place? About 2.2 times billion. That isn't a gap, you guys. That's a canyon. And what that leaves you with is a built-in guaranteed loss of $1.5 billion every single year. This isn't a bad year or a fluke. The system is fundamentally designed to lose an incredible amount of money. So you might be asking, how is it even still operating? Well, the government has to step in with a massive subsidy, about $2 billion a year, just to keep the lights on and the water kind of flowing. But this creates a vicious cycle. The bailout keeps WASA alive, but it also protects it from any real pressure to become efficient. And that's how you get this totally absurd paradox. The country is paying a fortune for expensive desalinated water, while at the very same time letting half the water it already has leak out of its pipes. But this whole mess isn't just about rusty pipes and bad math. No, it goes way deeper than that. This is about a systemic breakdown inside the organization. You could call it a culture of collapse. Just get a load of this. The approved structure for WASA is supposed to have 4 levels of management. In reality, it has 8. The approved headcount back in 1999 was just over 1,700 people. Today, it's more than 4,800. We're talking about organizational bloat on an absolutely epic scale. And when you have that kind of bloat, you get what government officials themselves have called a no-consequence environment. It's a place where mismanagement and inefficiency can just grow and grow because there's absolutely no accountability. And this is where it gets really ugly. This breakdown has led to some truly disturbing allegations, like the so-called water truck racket. The claim is that some insiders will actually shut off the water supply to a neighborhood on purpose. Why? To create a shortage. This forces desperate families to pay hundreds of dollars to private trucks for delivery of water, profiting directly from the failure of the very system they're supposed to be running. So, on top of the operational chaos and the alleged corruption, the financial accounting is, well, it's basically a black hole. For years on end, WASA's official auditors issued what's known as a disclaimer of opinion. So, what on earth does that mean? It is literally the worst possible thing an auditor can say. It means the financial records are such a complete and utter mess that they can't be verified. It's like an auditor stamping a giant sign on the company's books that just says, "Do not trust anything you read in here." Okay, so we have leaky pipes, a billion-dollar deficit, and books that are basically fiction. Where in the world do we even begin to fix something this broken? Well, it turns out most experts agree on one single critical first step. The path forward isn't some complex new restructuring plan. It's about basic governance. First, you take the quality of service standards and you make them legally binding. Then you give the regulator, the RIC, the actual power, the teeth to enforce those standards and hit WASA with real penalties when they fail. In other words, you finally create consequences. Which really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. When you look at this whole disaster, especially the fact that billions in assets couldn't even be verified by auditors, what's the most urgent infrastructure project here? Is it fixing the thousands of kilometers of pipes that are leaking half the nation's water? Or is the first, most critical piece of infrastructure they need to build a clean, trustworthy set of books?